Hello, my name is Akash, and in this video, we are going to talk about ChatGPT. My aim is to talk about ChatGPT from beginner's perspective and not get into technicals of machine learning. So let's get started. Agenda of the video is as follows. First, we are going to build our foundation by understanding the problem space that the ChatGPT is trying to solve. We are going to look at the topics like generative AI, generating text, and large language models to build our foundation. Then we're going to go and talk about basic example of solving the problem that ChatGPT is trying to solve. Finally, we are going to have ChatGPT overview, followed by prompt engineering. And then we are going to look into OpenAI's API for ChatGPT. Then we are going to learn about how to train ChatGPT on custom data. And finally, we are going to talk about future of LLM and the problem space that the ChatGPT is trying to solve. Generative AI is a field of machine learning with the goal of generating content automatically. Specifically, there is more interest around generating images and languages because these are the data that we consume the most in our daily lives, yet they are hardest to generate. In this slide, I have shown two examples of image generation and language generation. Common image generation tasks are overlay and text to image. In overlay, you have two images where one is the base image and other is the style image. And given those two images, objective of the model is to generate a third image where the base image would contain the element of the style image. In text to image, a model is provided a description of the image that you would like to generate, and model would end up generating the image given the text. Two of the common type of language generation tasks are translating a text and generating a text. For example, when you are using a chatbot, you are generating a text. Now let us look at generating the text task in detail, because this is the problem that many large language models, including ChatGPT, aims to solve. Objective of generating the text is to predict the next word given the existing word in a sentence. One way to solve generating a text problem is to simply analyze the common pair of words that occur together. In the example image below, we are analyzing one word at a time. Our objective is to understand the frequency of the words that happen immediately following the highlighted word. So for example, how many times in our text data the word brown follows the word quick, or the word fox follows the word brown. And there could be n number of words that follow the word quick, and all we are looking for is to generate a probability distribution that is going to help us solve this problem. Once we generate the probability distribution of the words that follow the current word, all we need to do is use random number generator to generate the next word given the existing word. But the problem with using such framework is that it would generate garbage. It would not be able to understand any context. It would not be able to understand or answer any questions. It would just follow the probability distribution that we have studied in our training data, and that is not so fruitful. So in order to generate more meaningful text that has context and that can answer the question that we are trying to ask, we use something called large language models. Large language models are massive machine learning models that are used for a variety of purpose in natural language processing, and we are going to look at those purposes on next slides. And they're often so large that it can be hard to run on a single computer, and they're trained using text dataset. Pretty much entire web data is crawled and used to train these models. And the objective of large language model is to predict the next word given the current word. The same thing that we are trying to solve on the previous slide. Some of the popular large language models include ChatGPT from OpenAI, Bard from Google, Llama from Meta, and BERT from Google. Common applications of large language model are chat, translation, search, text generation, and many more that are described below. Now let's talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a machine learning model generated by a company called OpenAI. Model has been specialized for chat purposes, and GPT here refers to generative pre-trained transformer. Pre-trained on a large dataset using machine learning model, and transformer is basically a type of neural network that is used to train ChatGPT. This type of neural networks are good at retaining context and generating text given the context. However, unlike human, ChatGPT models have limit on amount of context it can retain. So depending on the type of the model that you're using in ChatGPT, for example, if you're using ChatGPT 3, it can retain 4,096 tokens worth of conversational memory. GPT-4 has 32,000 tokens worth of memory. Now let's talk about what exactly are these tokens. In simplest term, tokens are words. So one single word equals to one token, but not always. So for example, if there's a sentence like I didn't search, then it could have more than three tokens. So in this case, it would be I didn't, and then the punctuations T and search could be considered as token. So the longer that you talk with ChatGPT model, the less context it would retain. So for example, if you have been talking for hours and hours with very long sentences, then model would start losing context. And that's one of the limitations of ChatGPT model. Now let's talk about using ChatGPT models. ChatGPT model often takes in an input in form of questions or instructions and responds to it. Input given to the ChatGPT model is known as prompt. Depending on the way that you form your input, you could get different response from GPT model. So in this section, we are going to talk about prompt engineering, specifically how to write good prompts so that you get the best possible result from GPT model. Prompt engineering is a way to provide instruction to ChatGPT model. Particularly, a better instruction to the model would result into a better results. Learning to craft better prompt is similar to learning to Google. If you write good search queries to the Google, you are going to get better results. In the same way, if you write good prompts to the model, then you're going to get better results. Let's talk about basic prompt engineering. Prompt can be in form of instruction or question. And along with those instruction and question, you could pass in input data or examples. And those input data and examples would assist model to provide answers to your questions or response to your instructions better. So let's look at a few examples of writing instructions or questions to the model along with input or examples. To use ChatGPT model, go on openai.com and click on Try ChatGPT. It will ask you to sign up or log in. I have an account, so I'm going to log in, but you might need to sign up. Once you log into ChatGPT, it will take you to this screen. In this screen, you can write a prompt where it says send a message and send, and ChatGPT will generate a response to your prompt. You can also create new chats over here, and ChatGPT will remember context for each of the chat individually. So let's write a simple question to ChatGPT. What is the capital city of Germany? And ChatGPT responds, the capital city of Germany is Berlin. You can also write instructions to ChatGPT. Let's write a basic instruction to ChatGPT model. Write a children's story involving princess. And ChatGPT will write a princess story for you. Similarly, I can provide input data to ChatGPT and provide some instruction. So for example, over here, I've said that automation technology helps improve worker productivity by assisting them in performing variety of tasks. However, with greater automation, more job will be taken away. And then I can instruct ChatGPT that write a constructive argument against the statement above. So ChatGPT will take this as a context and respond with respect to that context. So as you can see, it has written a constructive argument against the statement over here. If you're more flexible with the instruction, then ChatGPT will keep generating larger and larger response. Sometimes you do not want model to generate large responses. You want model to write argument in very crisp and short format. So what you can do in that case is provide more specific instructions to the model. So for example, in the above statement, I can just say, write a constructive statement against the statement above in 100 words. And the model will write a smaller response, responding to the instruction that I have provided above. Now let us look at providing input data and answering questions from the input data. So given this input data, first name, last name, and age, I can ask model what is the age of Rian. And model will say the age of Rian is 12 years old. Specifically, I can also ask question and model will retain the context from above input data. So I can continue to say, what is the last name of Tino? And the model will respond the last name of Tino. Similarly, I can also say, who is the oldest? and the model will respond Javier is the oldest. Now, I can be more specific on my instruction. For example, compare Android and iOS using bullet points. More specific I am in the instruction, better the results that the GPT model is going to yield. So in this case, you can see that Android and iOS is being compared using 5 to 7 points. I can also ask model to generate tabular data. Simply, all I have to do is ask it to use table instead of bullet points. So for example, compare Android and iOS using table, and it's going to generate a tabular data for us. Now let us look at some of the advanced prompting technique in ChatGPT. There are techniques like zero shot, one shot, and few shot. All it means is that basically providing examples to the model in order to yield better results. Zero shot means do not provide any example to the model. One shot means provide one example, and few shot means provide few examples to the model and see how the model responds. So now let's head over to the ChatGPT and then explore these techniques. Now let's assume we have following prompt. We want to label the following headline. LeBron James has scored 25 straight points. And when you click on submit, the model pretty much is vague in terms of labeling the headline. It does not provide basketball. So let's give it a few examples and see if the model is able to provide us with the sample label. So following prompt is an example of few shot. Over here, you can see we have provided it a couple of examples. Number one is Laker wins championship 2020 and label is basketball. And then we have provided an example that LeBron James has scored 25 points and the topic is basketball. And then finally, I have said Virat Kohli scores a century and we want the model to assign topic. When I hit submit, the model is going to say L is equal to cricket. That is completely correct. By providing few examples to the model, we are able to get model to perform the exact task that we're asking it to perform. Let's look at next advanced prompting technique. It's known as chain of thoughts. So basically what we do is we ask model to provide reasoning behind the answers that it is providing. So let's head over to ChatGPT and try out this technique. Now let's say I want to know who won NBA championship during coronavirus pandemic. So I can ask a simple question to the model for that and model will respond following. However, I want to pretty much apply chain of thoughts technique to this prompt. How do I do that? So I can write up a new prompt saying that who won NBA championship during coronavirus and then ask model to use reasoning to pretty much answer the question. So I can say coronavirus pandemic was during year, therefore NBA championship during that time were won by answer, right? And when I submit, the model is going to say the COVID-19 pandemic began in late 2019 and continued into year 2020 beyond. Therefore, the NBA championship during the time of pandemic were Los Angeles Lakers in the 2019 and 2020 NBA season, and they won championship in the October 2020. And after that, the season was temporarily suspended and resumed in the controlled environment at Walt Disney Orlando, and it was referred to as bubble. So what we have done is that we have asked model to apply reasoning in order to come up with an answer. Let's explore next technique. Give model a cue. So pretty much provide model with a starting point that this is what I want you to do. And model is going to continue from that starting point onward, right? So I can ask a question, open-ended question to the model that, why should I visit United States? And model is going to provide a very generic answer to that. But let's say if I want model to write using a following statement, using a particular starting statement in a particular order, then I can ask model to do exactly that. So given following prompt, why should I visit United States? I can ask model to say United States is a diverse country with many active tourist destination and it has, and then model is going to take this as a starting point and pretty much do a completion task on that. So let's hit submit and then you're going to see that. So you see it has a wide range of attractions, experience to offer, and then bunch of experiences that the model thinks that United States offers. Let's stop generating the response so that it doesn't continue. I can also ask it to limit the response by simply saying that, limit it into 5 sentences or something like that, and model will do that, right? And last technique that I want to cover about is providing structured input data. Previously, we looked at providing tabular data to the model and getting answers to the question. Similarly, we can also provide JSON, CSVs, or any other format to the ChatGPT, and it would answer your questions. So let's head over to ChatGPT and explore this. So let's say I have JSON data like this, where there's a color and value associated with it. And I ask it a question that what is the color code for white, and it will answer the question for us, which is the FFF. I can also ask what is the color code for red, and the model will retain the context and will answer that the color code for red is F000. Another advanced prompting technique that we did not cover was to ask model to act as an expert. So I can ask model to act as an expert machine learning engineer and then ask it to explain ChatGPT to me in 5 sentences, and model will try to act as an expert and answer me in simplistic form. Following a limitation of ChatGPT, it hallucinates. So for example, if I ask model something that doesn't exist, for example, write about a person that does not exist, then model sometimes can create a person, non-existing person, and write about him. It also has static knowledge. So model was heavily trained in 2021. So if I ask it a question about 2023, like let's say the price of the Microsoft stock in 2023, model will not be able to answer, unlike the search engine, which would be able to answer that question. Model is also confidently incorrect. So in short, it's not going to ask you a question or clarification question for your prompt and pretty much answer you confidently about any topic, even if it's incorrect. It also has input token limitation, like we saw before. It can only take up so many tokens as an input. And sometimes it also misinterprets your prompts without asking for any clarification. The model can be easily manipulated, and sometimes it can be too verbose, like we saw. So if I ask it a simple question like, tell me about the difference between iOS and Android, it can write about 700 or 800 words before stopping. And then finally, model sometimes shares the personal information. So if you use your private company information in the model, it's not going to be limited to you. It can share that information with someone else. So do not share private or proprietary information with ChatGPT model when interacting, because it is going to leak that information to other people. Now let's look at using OpenAI's API for ChatGPT, and particularly the type of arguments that you could pass into the ChatGPT's OpenAI API. So if you want to develop your own chatbot using OpenAI's API, you can do that, and we're going to look at how. So first, let's look at how to access OpenAI's API for ChatGPT. So go to openai.com, and under developer, you're going to have API references, and click on that. And it's going to show you how to actually use API. So you'll need to install packages. If you're using NumPy or Python, depending on that, you'll need to install packages. So Python is OpenAI. Both of them has the same name. So pip install OpenAI is going to install a package for you. You'll need authorization to use this API. So particularly, you'll need to generate OpenAI's API key. So let's look at how to do that. You can just go to your personal profile and then just click on View API Key. And when I click on View API Key, it will take me over here. I already have created one API key, so that's why it's showing it. But pretty much you click on Create a new secret key, and it's going to ask you to name it. So in that case, I can name it anything, date or data or something like that. And then I can ask it to create a secret. And then once I create a secret, it's going to pop up a window showing the API key, and you can just copy paste it and save it somewhere in the secure location. Once you have generated the API key, you can use it to interact with different types of model. Let's look at the chat API. So particularly chat completion using ChatGPT. So let's say you're trying to develop your own chatbot. So what you can do is you can call this endpoint, which is the chat completion endpoint, and you can develop your own conversational bot. Particularly, it will allow you to have more autonomy in terms of what sort of filters you want to apply to the responses of the model, right? So let's get started. So it has few arguments that you could provide to this endpoint. So for example, model, and in this case, the example snippet, it has said that GPT 3.5 Turbo, and when you click on this, it will allow you to explore different type of model. In this, it's all 3.5, but you could use potentially GPT 3 or GPT 4, depending on the price that you're willing to pay and the application that you have in your mind. And there are a few other arguments that you could provide, like message is the input that you're going to pass in, like how we used to type in the prompt is the same thing over here. And then it allows you to have other arguments like function calls. So if you want to call a custom function in the middle to do some processing, then model does allow you to call that particular custom function before and after the call has been made to the model. There are a few other interesting arguments that I want to cover in this, particularly temperature and top P. So temperature is a value between 0 to 2, and it pretty much allows model to be more flexible in terms of how creative versus how factual you want it to be. So lower the value for temperature, more factual it will try to be, and higher the value for temperature, the more creative it will try to be. Ideally, you would like it to be closer to 0 if possible. But if you go like, let's say around 2, then everything is going to be just extremely random, and you might not like the response at all. So value between 0 to 1 is the ideal value depending on how factual versus how creative you want to be. But when you get to the 2, it's just too random based on my experiments. It also has like, it's recommended that you use top P compared to temperature when you want to make model more creative. So what top P does is that it pretty much controls what sort of tokens get generated. So when you have the top P that is lower, what it will try to do is that it will try to generate the most commonly occurring tokens or most commonly occurring word compared to having a higher top P. So if you have a higher top P, then it will try to be more creative in its response. So lower the value is going to be less creative, and higher the value, it's going to be more creative, right? And it has few other arguments as well that are interesting. So for example, you can say n. So n is how many unique responses you'd like to generate for that particular message. And it could give you like few responses, and then you could select based on what sort of like circumstances you want to provide what responses, or you could just provide like all the responses and let the human choose which response they would like, and then how many tokens you'd like to generate, and what sort of stopword you want to use and things like that. You could also penalize the presence of some token. So it has a value between -2 to 2. It pretty much penalizes the new token every time they're repeated in the sentence, right? So if I repeat a particular word more again and again and again, then it's going to be penalized. And therefore, what would happen is that you're going to get like new and new token with each of the responses. If you're using OpenAI's API to communicate with ChatGPT model, then chances are that your requirement is to have a custom ChatGPT model. And you can do that by two ways. One is using OpenAI's platform for fine-tuning the model, or you could create an Azure resource. And I'm going to show you both. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to walk you through how to custom train ChatGPT model using Azure, because that service is only available currently to the organization and it's in the trial mode. So first, I'm going to show you how to train your custom model using OpenAI, and then I'm going to go and show you what to do if you want to be able to train your custom ChatGPT model using very minimal expertise in Azure. So let's get started. So in order to train a ChatGPT model, what you need is you need the training data. So here is like, a sample training data that I've created. So it is a prompt, what is a DRO, and then the completion, and then prompt, and then the completion, and so on. So basically in prompt, you write some text, and then in completion, you write some ideal response. And what you basically do is you'll need to install the OpenAI. So in order to do that, the OpenAI package, you just say pip install OpenAI. Once the package has been installed, you'll need to export your API key for the OpenAI, and I'm not going to do that over here. I'll pretty much use this command to prepare the data. So let's look at the command. OpenAI tools fine-tunes.prepare data -f, and this is where the argument is provided, the file, which is the trained data.json. You need to make sure that the file that you generate has an extension such as .csv, .json, .xml, and so on. If that extension is not there, then the function is going to throw an error saying that, hey, I need that extension, and you'll need to do that. So let's execute this code. And once you do that, it's going to say that, we need a separator in our prompt. So do you want to add that? And I'm going to say yes. Same thing with suffix that, it wants to add /n to all the completion. And I'm going to say, sure, do that, white space, do that. And then it's going to go and write us a new file. So in this case, they'll say that a new file is train data prepare.json, right? And then once you do that, you can pretty much go and execute a new command that is going to go and create a fine tune based off of the training data that you have generated over here, which is this one. And that command is OpenAI API finetunes.create, and then T is the training file that you have over here. So in this case, the training file is going to be train data underscore prepared, right? So I can just say train data underscore prepared, and then the base model that I want to use. So in this case, the base model could be GPT 3.5 Turbo or GPT-3 or anything, depending on which model that you would like to fine tune. So in this case, I can say GPT-3. And once I hit submit, it is going to give me a job ID that I can monitor using OpenAI package. And then once the fine tune has completed, it's going to give you a model name. And using OpenAI's chat API, I can go and make a call. And the only thing that I'll need to change over here is that the model, instead of it being GPT 3.5 Turbo, I'm going to be using the model that I have fine tuned, and rest of the argument are going to remain same. And pretty much now you have a custom trained model that is specific to your use case. Now, this may be a little bit hard for you to manage because this is an external system that your company requires. So what you can do is you can instead use the Microsoft Azure's OpenAI resources over here. So all you need to do is you can say OpenAI. And when you say OpenAI in the portal, it's going to give you an Azure OpenAI instance. And you can go and create an OpenAI instance. But the problem with me is that you need to go and request for the access to the OpenAI resource using the request form that you have over here. And once you use that request form, you are going to be able to use that services over here. So your company will need to fill this out, and Microsoft is going to onboard you to this resource, which you can use to custom train your models. And custom training your model is pretty simple using the OpenAI. So based on my experience, all you need to do is that you need to select a particular model over here. You're going to have pretty much different type of model. You can say that I want to train a GPT 3.5 Turbo or something like that. And you can store all of your data into Azure Blob. So like, let's say you have a bunch of documentation in your company and you want to train a model on that documentation. You can pretty much upload all of your documentation in your Azure data lake. And that data lake can be used as an input point to this model, and then that model can be deployed. And the documentation for this I'm going to include in the video section. So in the description section of the video, so you can go and look at how you can use OpenAI service to go and train your custom model. Finally, if your use case is to train a custom chatbot, then you could use packages like LangChain and others in order to develop your chatbot, or you can use like .NET bot framework in order to develop your chatbot as well. It's not going to be backed by any LLM model. In some case, it might be, but depending on the packages that you use, it might or might not be backed by an LLM model, and you could develop your chatbot as well that are particular to your use case. And if you want me to make a video about developing a chatbot using LangChain or the .NET framework, the bot framework, then let me know in the comments and I can make a video for that. And I'm also going to be making a video once the Azure OpenAI service becomes available to the public. Currently, it's not available to the public, so I'm not able to make the video, but let me know if you want me to make a video on that, and I'll be making that in future as well. So that being said, let's look at the future works in this domain, particularly the domain of language models. And what we want to be able to do is we want to focus on two things, and particularly there's a lot of research going on in this space, particularly in two areas. One is small model, and another one is factual model. The problem with the existing framework is that some of the models like GPT-4 are extremely large that it cannot fit on a single computer. You need to have a data center to train those models and sometimes also serve those models. And it can be very costly to do that, right? So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to develop a small model. And recently, Stanford had developed a very small model based off of Llama 2. So what it ended up doing was it ended up asking ChatGPT that, can you make us a sample data set to train a small model? And it did make a sample data set, and it trained a very small LLM model that could fit your computer. And that's the future. Eventually, we want to reach a space where we can fit the LLM model in our mobile phones so that, we can use it for all sorts of applications like we listed about, such as like summarization, text complete, and whatnot, right? And the second thing is factual models. So ChatGPT is confidently incorrect. That's one of the limitation of the model. And it is trained on the internet, like, entire internet data. So they have scraped the entire internet and trained the ChatGPT model. And that has caused the GPT model to consume a lot of the misinformation. And that's why it is sometimes wrong. So if you're using large language models for an application like medicine or, law or something like that, then you want the models to be very factually correct. You don't want it to make up new stuff, right? So the new work over here is that you can pretty much go and train the models that are specifically based off of factual information. So like research paper that have been proved and things like that. It requires a very extensive vetting of the training data that you are going to be providing to your model, and then consistently penalizing the model during the training time for producing the hallucinated data or the false data or misinformed data, right? And eventually making a model that you could use for a real world application like, medicine, where a person can type in a question that I'm having this issue, can you go and recommend me treatment? And model will be able to recommend it using a factual information. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you want me to make a technical video in terms of how the chat GPT works under the hood. I can make one for you, but in this video, we're mainly focused on what exactly chat GPT is and how to use the prompt engineering techniques to produce better results. And finally, we looked at how do we actually go and train our custom chat GPT model. Thank you.